Get on your knees and clean it up. Trent Sterling kicked the mop bucket deliberately, sending gray, sudsy water crashing across the gym mat and into the janitor's scuffed boots. The sharp chemical smell of bleach filled the silence instantly. 20 elite fighters stopped hitting their bags. Nobody moved. Nobody laughed except Trent's crew. The old man in the faded uniform didn't step back, didn't look up.
Big mistake. He just declared war on the one man holding the keys to his entire future. Keep watching.
He just adjusted his grip on the mop handle, slowly, deliberately, finger by finger, the way a surgeon picks up a scalpel. The bucket hit the floor first, then the water came. It spread fast, gray, sudsy, and cold, rushing across the pristine gym mat in a wide, unstoppable wave. It swallowed the cracked leather of the janitor's work boots whole. Every drop soaked in. Every fighter in the room stopped moving. 20 pairs of eyes turned. 20 bodies went still. Trent Sterling did not move back. He stood exactly where he had kicked the bucket weight forward, chin up, watching the old man in the faded uniform absorb the damage. He wore his boxing shoes, white custom-fitted, blinding and spotless, and they squeaked sharp and expensive against the mat as he pivoted to face his audience. The sound cut through the room, clean, deliberate, a performer hitting his mark. "Why don't you get on your knees and soak that up, old man?" Trent's voice was loud, bright, and meant to carry. It carried. "It's the only thing you're good for." Some of the fighters laughed, not all of them, but enough. Marcus Vance did not flinch. He did not step back. He did not raise his eyes immediately. He stood with both hands wrapped around the wooden mop handle, still and straight, and stared down at the puddle spreading across the floor beneath him. The chemical smell of bleach and dirty sweat filled the silence. It was thick, harsh, and suffocating. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved to help. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flat and indifferent, throwing hard shadows across the mat. Marcus adjusted his grip on the mop handle. His fingers moved slowly, deliberately pressing into the wood with a quiet, measured tension. Each finger found its position. Each knuckle settled. It was not the grip of a man bracing himself. It was the grip of a man who had done this before. Not this exactly. Not the mop. Something else. Something older and heavier and far more serious. Trent noticed none of it. "You going to stand there all day?" Trent stepped closer. His diamond stud earring caught the fluorescent light as he tilted his head, flashing once, cold and bright like a camera shutter. He gestured at the soaked mat with one gloved hand. "Get down, clean it up. That's what they pay you for." More laughter, comfortable, easy laughter, the kind that comes from people who have decided the situation is safe. Marcus lifted his eyes then. Slow. He looked at Trent. He did not look angry or frightened or humiliated. His face was calm, flat, and utterly unreadable. His jaw was set. His shoulders were square beneath the cheap faded polyester of his maintenance uniform. The fabric was thin and worn, bleach-stained at the hem, soft from too many washes. Against the custom boxing gear, the branded athletic wear, the $200 compression shorts Trent wore with casual arrogance, Marcus looked like a man from a different century. A different world. He looked in every material way like exactly what Trent believed him to be. Trent rolled his neck. He turned back to his entourage and spread his arms wide. He was performing now, fully committed, working the room. "You see this," he called out. "This is why you stay hungry, boys. You end up mopping somebody else's floor." The laughs came louder this time. Marcus did not respond. He reached into his front pocket and pulled out a small, worn notebook. The cover was soft creased at every corner, dark with use. He opened it, uncapped a short pen, and began writing. His handwriting was tight and precise. The letters did not waver. Trent turned back. He saw the notebook. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite anger, not yet. Something smaller and meaner, the instinct of a man who does not like being ignored. He crossed the distance in 2 steps. His gloved hand shot out fast and dismissive and snatched the notebook directly from Marcus's fingers. "Let's see what garbage you're scribbling," Trent said. He held the notebook up, scanning the pages with exaggerated attention, performing confusion, then contempt. "What is this?" He turned it toward his audience, showing them the neat, dense lines of handwritten notes. Nobody could read it from that distance. That was not the point. He laughed. "You writing your memoirs, old man? You writing your grocery list?" Marcus said nothing. Trent's expression hardened. The laugh faded. What replaced it was something quieter and colder and more deliberate. He grabbed the notebook with both hands, fingers braced against the spine, and tore it. The sound was sharp, violent, and sudden. A single clean rip straight down the center. The pages split white and crisp, and the two halves fluttered from his hands. They dropped into the dirty gray puddle on the mat below. The paper dissolved instantly. The ink ran. Dead silence. 20 fighters stood without moving. Not one of them stepped forward. Not one of them said a word. They watched the ruined pages sink into the water, pale and shapeless, and none of them looked directly at the janitor's face. Marcus watched the pages go. He watched the water pull the ink from the paper in slow, spreading threads. His hands were still on the mop handle. His grip, measured and precise, had not changed. The room held its breath. But Trent had no idea what kind of hands were actually holding that mop. The alarm did not wake him. Marcus was already awake. He sat on the edge of his narrow bed in the dark, still and quiet, listening to the city outside his window settle into the slow, gray silence of early morning. It was 4:30 a.m. The apartment was modest, small, and almost entirely without decoration. A single lamp burned on the kitchen counter. The light it threw was weak and yellow enough to see by nothing more. He stood. He moved to the kitchen. He filled a chipped mug with water from the kettle and stirred in a spoonful of black instant coffee. The scent hit immediately, bitter, sharp, and clean. He breathed it in once slowly, then set the mug down on the counter without drinking. He crossed the room to the closet. The closet held very little. Work clothes folded. A spare pair of boots scuffed and heavy-set neatly side by side on the floor. And behind them, pushed to the back, sat a case. It was a long, flat, hard-sided case, dark gray, scratched at every edge, reinforced at the corners with dull metal brackets. It had a combination lock. Marcus crouched in front of it, turned the dial 3 times with practiced ease, and lifted the lid. Inside, set into custom foam cutouts, lay 3 boxing belts. They were not decorative. They were not the polished replica kind sold in sports memorabilia shops. These were real, worn, and heavily used. The leather was cracked along the edges. The gold plating had dulled in places, rubbed smooth by years of handling. The center plates were engraved dense with detail, each one stamped with a different federation seal, a different year, a different city. World champion, world champion, world champion, 3 times, 3 different decades. 3 different versions of the same man. Marcus did not touch them. He looked at them for a long moment, quiet and still. His face held no particular expression. No nostalgia, no pride, no grief. Something older than any of those. Something that had long since moved past needing a name. He reached past the belts. In the lower compartment of the case, beneath a thin panel of foam, lay 2 items. The first was a folded document. He opened it carefully. It was a scouting dossier printed on thick paper, dense with photographs, statistics, and handwritten margin notes. Names were highlighted. Performance metrics were underlined. One page held a single photograph at the top, a fighter mid-combination, technically proficient, physically imposing, and circled in red pen. Next to the photograph in Marcus's own tight handwriting were 2 words, "Not yet." He folded the dossier. He set it on the counter beside his coffee. The second item was a ring. He lifted it carefully, holding it between his thumb and forefinger. It was heavy, solid, and unmistakably real. The band was thick gold, wide enough to cover the first knuckle. The center stone was a diamond, large, and set low, surrounded by a ring of smaller stones, and engraved on the inner face with 3 letters and a year. He did not read them. He knew them already. He had known them for a long time. He slipped the ring into the front pocket of his uniform pants. The fabric was cheap, thin, and fraying at the seam. The pocket sagged slightly under the weight. He pressed his palm flat against it for a moment, feeling the solid, cold mass of the gold through the polyester, and then he let his hand drop. He drank his coffee standing at the counter. He drank it slowly, without pleasure, the way a man drinks something he needs, rather than something he wants. The apartment was quiet around him. No television, no radio, no sound except the distant muffled noise of the city beginning to move outside. He rinsed the mug. He dried it, he set it back in the cabinet, then he went to the battered janitorial cart parked beside the front door. It was old, the kind of cart issued by a facilities contractor and replaced only when it fully collapsed. The base was scuffed to bare metal in several places. The mop bracket was repaired with zip ties. The lower compartment, a wide, flat shelf between the wheels, held cleaning supplies, a folded trash bag, and a spare set of gloves. Marcus moved the supplies to one side. Beneath them, flat against the shelf, lay a clipboard. It was not old. It was not worn. It was new, rigid, and gleaming. The surface was gold, not metallic paint, but actual gold finish, anodized aluminum, smooth and heavy and reflective. Centered at the top, embossed and printed in deep navy ink, was a seal. Circular, official. The seal of the United States Olympic Committee. Below it, in clean block lettering, Official Evaluation, National Boxing Program, Restricted. He looked at it for a moment. Then he covered it again with the cleaning supplies. He straightened up. He pulled his faded uniform jacket from the hook by the door and put it on, working the zipper from the bottom with one hand, slow and automatic. He checked the pocket where the ring sat. Still there. Still heavy. He picked up the mop handle from its bracket, wrapped his fingers around the wood, and turned toward the door. The lamp on the kitchen counter was still on. He did not turn it off. He stepped out into the hallway, pulling the cart behind him, and the door clicked shut in the dark. He was not going to the gym to clean the floors. He was going to decide someone's future. Quietly. Without announcement. The way the most serious things are always done. He wasn't there to clean the floors. He was there to sweep out the trash. Marcus returned to the present. He pushed the cart slowly along the far wall, moving in the direction of the heavy bags. The wheels squeaked against the mat, low, rhythmic, and ignored. Nobody looked at him. Nobody acknowledged the cart, the uniform, or the man inside it. He was furniture. He was part of the building. He was the kind of presence a room full of ambitious, loud, well-funded fighters learned to look past without effort or intention. He preferred it that way. The heavy bags hung in a long row near the back wall, 8 of them, thick and dense, swaying almost imperceptibly in the recycled gym air. They were expensive bags, not the kind filled with sand and cloth scraps. These were filled with a layered polymer compound calibrated for resistance, wrapped in genuine leather that still smelled new. Everything in this gym smelled either new or chemically clean. The mats, the gloves, the ropes, the painted cinder block walls. Apex Elite Boxing Academy spent money the way some organizations spent words, constantly and without apparent concern for the return. Marcus positioned the cart in the maintenance corner beside the last bag. He lifted the mop. He began to work the floor in slow, even strokes. His back stayed straight. His movements were unhurried, practiced. Trent arrived at the bags 4 minutes later. He came in loud. He always came in loud. His entourage filed in behind him, 3 fighters and 2 others who appeared to serve no athletic function whatsoever, present only to observe and affirm. Trent rolled his shoulders. He shook out his hands. He took his position in front of the center bag with the confidence of a man who had never once doubted whether he belonged in the center of a room. He began to hit. The sound was immediate, overwhelming, and violent. The leather gloves connected with the bag in heavy, thunderous impacts, dense and concussive, the kind of sound that traveled through the floor and into the soles of your feet before it reached your ears. Trent was powerful. That was not in question. His combinations were fast, his punching volume was high, and he moved with the sharp, explosive athleticism of someone who had trained seriously since childhood. His diamond stud earring caught the harsh fluorescent light overhead, with every head movement flashing cold and bright, a small, expensive metronome marking his rhythm. His entourage watched. They nodded. They made sounds of appreciation at the right moments. Marcus mopped the floor. He worked his way closer, methodical and slow, following the natural cleaning path along the wall. His eyes stayed down. His movements stayed unremarkable. But behind the downward cast of his gaze, something else was operating. Something quiet, cold, and entirely precise. He was watching Trent's feet. Not the punches, not the combinations, the feet. Specifically the way Trent's weight transferred on every left hook. The heel came up a fraction too early. The hip rotation was aggressive, powerful, and fundamentally uncontrolled. The left hand dropped afterward, not dramatically, not enough for an untrained eye to catch, but enough. Always enough. And the jab, quick and sharp as it was, left the right side of Trent's chin exposed for a window of approximately 300 milliseconds on every third combination cycle. Marcus noted it. He filed it. He moved on. Trent finished a combination. He turned to his audience, breathing hard and grinning wide. He said something. They laughed. He gestured at the bag with both gloves, a satisfied proprietary gesture, the way a man pats the hood of a car he has just purchased. Then he turned and saw Marcus. Closer now, only a few feet away, moving the mop in slow arcs across the mat near the bag station. Trent's grin shifted, not into anger immediately, into something more theatrical. He looked at his entourage. He looked back at Marcus. He spread his arms slightly, setting the scene. "Careful, old man," Trent said loudly. "You're going to pull something working that hard." Laughter, immediate and obedient. Marcus did not look up. Trent stepped back to the bag. He reset his stance. He began throwing again, harder this time, louder, working the bag with increased intensity. The impacts were enormous. Each punch drove the bag back on its chain with a heavy, violent arc. The chain links rattled and strained. The sound bounced off the cinder block walls and came back doubled. Trent threw a right hand, then a left hook. Then he pivoted suddenly and without warning and threw a wide looping hook that sailed within an inch of Marcus's face. The displaced air rushed across Marcus's cheek, sharp and sudden, like the edge of something passing very close and very fast. Trent laughed, loud, bright, and completely unashamed. "Whoa!" he said, turning to his audience with exaggerated concern. "My bad." He was not sorry. He was delighted. "You good old-timer didn't clip you, did I?" Marcus had not moved, had not stepped back, had not raised his hands or turned his head. He stood exactly as he had stood before, the punch mop handle in both hands. Shoulders level, weight balanced, eyes still cast downward at the floor. His breathing had not changed. His expression had not changed. Nothing about him had changed at all. Trent noticed this. A flicker of something crossed his face. Not respect, too small for that and too unfamiliar. Something more like irritation, like a man who has thrown a stone into water and received no ripple. He leaned toward his entourage. "You see that limp when he walked in this morning?" His voice was pitched to carry. It carried. Man can barely move and he's still showing up to clean other people's sweat off the floor. He shook his head slowly, performing sadness he did not feel. "That's what no game plan looks like, boys. That's what happens when life beats you and you don't tap out." More laughter. Longer this time. Marcus kept mopping. His eyes moved once, briefly. "Wait, absolutely not. He's treating a human being like a punching bag just to get a few cheap laughs from his buddies. If that were me, I wouldn't have been able to hold back for a single second." Imagine standing there in absolute silence while a kid half your age mocks the way you walk. The audacity is real.
Wait, absolutely not. He's treating a human being like a punching bag just to get a few cheap laughs from his buddies. If that were me, I wouldn't have been able to hold back for a single second. Imagine standing there in absolute silence while a kid half your age mocks the way you walk. The audacity is real.
Inside the railing sat 2 speed bag stations, a double-end bag, a private mirror wall, and a single heavy bag reserved exclusively for members carrying a platinum tier membership. A small placard on the railing said in clean sans serif lettering, "Private Training Area, Members Only." Marcus pushed his cart through the gap in the railing at 11:14 a.m. He had a job to do. The floor inside the VIP section had not been mopped since the morning session. There was a visible smear of chalk dust near the mirror wall, and a small puddle of water beside the speed bag station where someone had set down a sweating bottle and walked away. Standard maintenance. Routine. He positioned the cart, lifted the mop, and began working the floor in his usual slow, even strokes. He was 6 minutes into the job when Trent walked in. Trent did not come through the railing gap. He stepped over the railing in one easy motion, gloves already on his hands, earring, catching the light entourage filing in behind him through the proper gap like a loose, unhurried procession. He stopped when he saw Marcus. He looked at the cart. He looked at the mop. He looked at the puddle of dirty water slowly retreating across the floor under Marcus's work. Then he looked at Marcus. "Who let you in here?" Trent's voice was flat and immediate. Marcus did not answer. He moved the mop in a steady arc, working the water toward the drain strip along the base of the mirror wall. "Hey." Trent stepped closer. His boxing shoes squeaked sharp against the charcoal floor. "I'm talking to you. Who told you that you could bring that thing in here?" Marcus stopped. He leaned the mop against the cart. He reached into the front pocket of his uniform and pulled out the small, worn notebook. He opened it to a fresh page, uncapped his pen, and began to write. His handwriting was tight, precise, and unhurried. He was logging the time, the location, and the maintenance task completed. Standard procedure, documented, dated, and signed. Trent stared at the notebook. Something shifted in his face. The same small, mean shift Marcus had seen before at the heavy bags. The instinct of a man who reads stillness as weakness and silence as invitation. "Put that away," Trent said. Marcus kept writing. "I said put it away." Trent's voice rose, not yet a shout, something tighter and more controlled. The voice of someone accustomed to being obeyed and newly privately furious at not being obeyed. He stepped forward. He was close now, very close. His gloved hand came up fast and dismissive, and he snatched the notebook from Marcus's fingers in a single sharp motion. Marcus's hand stayed where it had been, pen still uncapped, finger still positioned. He lowered his hand slowly. He looked at Trent. Trent held the notebook up and made a performance of examining it. He turned it toward his entourage with exaggerated curiosity. His voice rose to include the wider gym floor where other fighters had begun to drift toward the railing drawn by the elevated pitch of the situation. "Look at this," Trent announced. "The janitor's keeping notes." He scanned the pages, turning them slowly. Times, dates, little observations. He looked back at Marcus. "What is this?" "You writing a book, no answer. You think this is important?" Trent's voice shifted again, lower now. More deliberate, more dangerous. He tapped the open notebook with one gloved finger. "You think any of this matters? You think anyone is ever going to read this?" He grabbed the notebook with both hands, his fingers pressed into the spine thumbs braced against the center crease. He looked directly at Marcus as he did it. He wanted Marcus to see it coming. He wanted Marcus to ask him to stop. Marcus said nothing. Trent tore the notebook in half. The sound was sharp, clean, and violent. A single hard rip straight down the center, the thick pages splitting under the force with a crack that carried across the gym floor. The two halves separated completely. The pages fanned open as they fell white and loose and helpless and dropped into the gray puddle of dirty mop water still sitting on the charcoal floor. The paper hit the water flat. It began absorbing immediately, the white surface darkening the edges, curling the ink, blooming outward in slow, spreading threads of blue-black that dissolved into nothing within seconds. Gone, all of it. The gym had gone completely silent. Not the polite, uncertain quiet of people unsure how to react. The dead, suffocating silence of 20 people who had decided collectively and without discussion that they were not going to involve themselves. Fighters stood at the railing. They watched. They did not move. They did not speak. They held their water bottles and their hand wraps and their expensive personalized training gear, and they stood perfectly still and let it happen. Trent dropped the remaining scraps of the cover onto the wet floor. He stepped back. He adjusted his gloves. He looked at Marcus with the relaxed, satisfied expression of a man who has just resolved something. "You don't belong in this section," Trent said. "You don't belong in this league." He said it simply, plainly, without heat, the way a person states a fact they consider beyond reasonable dispute. "Pack your cart and get out." Marcus looked at the ruined pages in the water. He looked at the dissolving ink. If you want to see exactly how this arrogant bully gets systematically dismantled, you know what to do. Now back to Marcus. He looked at the careful, precise, irreplaceable observations soaking into the dirty gray puddle on the floor. His face remained still flat and completely unreadable. Trent thought he was tearing up garbage. He was actually tearing up a $2 million contract. Marcus knelt on the wet mat. He did not lower himself slowly or carefully. He went down on both knees with the quiet, deliberate economy of a man performing a necessary task, nothing more. The dirty water soaked through the thin fabric of his uniform pants immediately. Cold, gray, and immediate. He felt it spread across both kneecaps, seeping into the cheap polyester, pulling the fabric flat against his skin. He did not react. He reached into the puddle with both hands and began gathering the ruined pages. They came apart as he lifted them. The paper had absorbed too much water too quickly. The sheets that had been whole were now soft and fragile, tearing at the edges when he tried to separate them. He worked slowly, carefully peeling each page from the ones beneath it, trying to preserve what remained. Most of it was gone. The ink had run completely in the lower sections, the careful columns of observations reduced to gray-blue smears, decorative and meaningless. Some lines near the top of certain pages had survived. Partial sentences, fragments of evaluation criteria, numbers without context, nothing usable, nothing that could be reconstructed into what it had been. He kept gathering anyway. The gym had partially resumed around him, not fully. The energy was wrong, restless and uncomfortable, the specific discomfort of a room full of people who have witnessed something they would prefer not to have witnessed. Bagwork started up again near the front. Someone began skipping rope. Conversations restarted in low, careful voices, but nobody came near the VIP section. Nobody looked directly at the man kneeling in the dirty water. Trent had moved to the speed bag. He was working it with sharp, rapid combinations, the leather snapping fast and rhythmic, deliberately loud. His entourage had clustered near him, recalibrating the atmosphere, pulling the room's attention back toward their corner, back toward the performance, back toward what they preferred the gym to be about. Marcus kept his eyes down. He kept working. And in the silence of that posture, kneeling and alone, something began to move through him that he had not anticipated. Not anger, not humiliation. Something quieter and more corrosive and in some ways more dangerous than either. A question, small at first, then larger. He had been doing this for 7 months, moving through gyms like this one invisible patient absorbing watching. 7 months of early mornings, bitter instant coffee, battered carts, and faded uniforms. 7 months of men like Trent who looked through him without effort and without guilt. He had believed completely and without reservation that the work was worth the method, that what he was building, quietly, evaluation by evaluation, observation by observation, would matter in the end, that the sport deserved it, that the next generation of fighters deserved someone willing to find them honestly, without the distortion of money or reputation or the performed confidence of men whose fathers had already bought them their platform. But kneeling here now on the cold, wet floor, gathering pages that had dissolved into nothing, he felt the question form with uncomfortable clarity. Was patience a virtue, or was it simply a more dignified name for inaction? Was his composure a form of discipline, or had it become a habit so ingrained he could no longer distinguish it from surrender? The sport had changed. Not in the ring. In the room surrounding the ring, in the money, the sponsorships, the social media accounts, the carefully constructed personal brands of fighters who had learned to sell themselves before they had learned to defend themselves. Men like Trent existed because the system rewarded them. Loudly. Expensively. With $2 million contracts and platinum-tier memberships and gyms that smelled like money and treated the invisible people inside them like furniture. Maybe the honor he was looking for no longer existed. Maybe he was the last person still searching for something the sport had quietly discarded years ago, kneeling in dirty water, holding dissolved pages alone. He pressed both palms flat against the wet mat and prepared to stand. Then he heard the footsteps. Fast, coming from his left. Close. Too close and closing faster. He registered it the way he had always registered incoming danger, not as a thought, but as a physical event. A shift in air pressure, a change in the acoustic texture of the space immediately around him. Something was moving toward his head at speed. Trent's phone was already raised, recording. His entourage had spread slightly, creating a loose semicircle behind him, angled for the best viewing position. Trent had decided that a kneeling old janitor flinching away from a punch would generate excellent content. Fast, funny, shareable. The kind of humiliation that traveled well across platforms and aged like a fine, cruel wine. He threw the punch. It was fast. Genuinely fast. The kind of speed that had earned Trent his undefeated record and his reputation, and the attention of every major sponsorship office in the country. The glove accelerated toward Marcus's head with real committed velocity, not a stage punch, not a slow approximation of violence. A real strike aimed to pass within inches and produce a flinch. Marcus slipped it. One movement. Compact, precise, and instantaneous. His torso shifted left by exactly the required distance. His head dropped and rotated in a single fluid motion. The glove passed his right ear with a rush of displaced air close enough that he felt the leather disturb the short hairs at his temple. He did not drop the wet pages. He did not plant his hands on the floor. He did not stumble or overcorrect or produce any of the graceless scrambling of a man reacting to surprise. He simply was not where the punch was going, and then the punch was gone. And Marcus was still kneeling, still holding the ruined pages, completely composed as if nothing had interrupted him at all. The gym went silent again. Faster this time. Trent stood with his arm extended and his fist meeting nothing. He stared at the empty space where Marcus's head had been. His entourage stared. The phone was still recording. Nobody moved. Trent missed the punch. But Marcus didn't miss a thing. Nobody spoke. The gym held its breath in the specific pressurized way that rooms hold their breath when something has happened that nobody present has the vocabulary to immediately process. The bag work had stopped. The rope had stopped. The low, careful conversations had stopped. 20 fighters stood in various positions across the floor, some with gloves, still raised, some with water bottles halfway to their mouths, all of them looking at the same thing. A kneeling janitor, an extended glove, an empty space between them where impact should have been. Trent pulled his arm back slowly. He looked at his hand. He looked at Marcus. He looked at his entourage. His jaw was tight. The easy, performative confidence he wore like a second skin had developed a crack, small and thin, but visible. He did not know what had just happened. He knew the mechanical facts of it. He had thrown a punch. The punch had missed. But the how of it was refusing to assemble itself into anything coherent. The old man had not scrambled, had not thrown himself backward, had not produced the wide, graceless panic of someone reacting to sudden danger. He had simply moved once correctly with a precision that did not belong in this room, in this uniform, on these knees. Trent made a decision. He chose anger. It was the most familiar tool available. Coach Davis. His voice came out hard and loud. He turned toward the glass-walled office at the far end of the gym without taking his eyes fully off Marcus. "Coach Davis, get out here, right now." A beat of silence. Then the office door opened. Coach Davis was a compact, broad-shouldered man in his late 50s with the weathered, careful face of someone who had spent decades managing things more volatile than he let on. He wore a plain gray tracksuit and carried a clipboard of his own, worn and paper-heavy. The clipboard of a man who ran a facility on margins that required constant, anxious documentation. He came out of the office at a measured pace, not rushing, reading the room as he crossed it. His eyes moved from Trent to the entourage to the wet floor to the kneeling figure beside the cart. He stopped. His face changed, not dramatically, not with the wide, theatrical shock of a man encountering something impossible, with something quieter and more complete than that. A stillness that moved from his expression downward through his entire body, settling into his feet, rooting him to the spot. His clipboard dropped slightly in his hand. The color left his face in a slow, even tide, starting at the jaw and moving upward. "Coach Davis," Trent said again sharply, "I want this man removed immediately. He just took a swing at me, and I want him out of this building, and I want him out of the program, and I want it documented." Davis did not look at Trent. He was looking at Marcus. Marcus rose from his knees. He moved without hurry, without performance, unfolding from the kneeling position, with the measured, unhurried ease of a man who had decided the floor had given him everything it was going to give him. He straightened to his full height. He was not a tall man, but standing now straight and still, there was a quality to the way he occupied space that had not been visible before, something that the uniform had concealed, or that the mop handle had redistributed, or that the kneeling posture had folded away entirely. He stood the way men stand when they have nothing left to prove and know it completely. He reached into the front pocket of his uniform pants. His fingers found the ring. He drew it out slowly, holding it between his thumb and forefinger the way he had held it in his apartment that morning, turning it once in the light. The gold caught the fluorescent overhead and threw it back warm and heavy and unmistakable. The diamond at the center fractured the light into a brief, clean scatter of brightness. He looked at it for one moment. Then he slipped it onto the ring finger of his right hand. The metallic clink of solid gold settling against calloused, bleach-stained skin was small and quiet, but in the silence of the gym, it carried. He turned to the cart. He moved the cleaning supplies to one side with one hand. He reached into the lower compartment and drew out the gold Olympic clipboard. He held it at his side, face outward, the embossed seal of the United States Olympic Committee visible from 20 feet in every direction, clear, official, and irrefutable. He looked at Coach Davis. Davis moved, fast for a man of his build and age, crossing the remaining distance between them in a dozen quick steps. He stopped in front of Marcus. He straightened. He dropped his own clipboard to his side. And then, with the quiet, total sincerity of a man who understands exactly what a moment requires, he bowed his head. "Boss," Davis said, soft, immediate, without qualification. The word landed in the silence like a stone dropped into still water. The ripples moved outward across the faces of the entourage first, then the fighters at the railing, then the rest of the gym floor. You could watch it travel. You could see the exact moment it reached each person, and the exact moment their understanding of the previous 7 months rearranged itself completely and irrevocably. Trent heard it. He stood very still. The color in his face had not left the way Davis's had. It had done something worse. It had concentrated, rising in 2 flat patches high on his cheekbones, the specific burning color of a man who has just understood fully and without mercy the precise nature and scale of his mistake. He looked at the ring. He looked at the clipboard. He looked at Davis's bowed head. "What?" Trent said, not a question. The word came out hollow, stripped of everything that had been inside it all morning. The arrogance, the performance, the bright, easy cruelty, all of it gone. One flat syllable standing in the space where a person used to be. Marcus looked at him. Calm, flat, and entirely without satisfaction. He wasn't just a retired fighter. He owned the entire future of the sport. Marcus did not raise his voice. He never raised his voice. That was the thing about men who had spent decades in rooms where everything was decided by force, by volume, by the raw, percussive authority of one body imposing its will on another. They learned eventually that the quietest version of power was the most complete. You did not need to shout when the room was already listening. You did not need to perform when the performance was already over. He looked at Trent for a long moment, still and level. The ring on his right hand caught the light once as he shifted the clipboard to his other arm. Then he spoke. "My name is Marcus Vance," he said. His voice was low, even, and completely without theater. "I hold 3 world championship titles across 3 separate decades. I am the current lead evaluator for the United States Olympic boxing program. I have been embedded in this facility for 7 months under standard undercover scouting protocol authorized and documented by the National Committee." He paused. One beat. Clean and deliberate. "Everything I have observed during that period has been logged, assessed, and formally submitted." Trent opened his mouth. Marcus continued. "You have a pending sponsorship agreement," he said. $2 million. Primary investment from the National Program's Commercial Development Fund, co-signed by 3 independent athletic sponsors contingent on Olympic selection. He held the gold clipboard level and steady face outward, the seal catching the light. "That agreement is processed through my office. Final authorization requires my signature." He looked at Trent directly, without blinking. "It will not be receiving my signature." The gym was absolutely silent. Not the uncomfortable, restless silence of earlier. Not the suffocating silence of 20 people choosing not to intervene. This was a different quality of silence entirely. Denser and more complete, the silence of a room in which something irrevocable has just been said aloud, and every person present understands with perfect clarity that it cannot be unsaid. Trent's entourage had stopped being an entourage. They stood individually now, separated by the small but absolute distances that open between people when the social structure holding them together has been removed. Nobody was performing adjacency to Trent anymore. Nobody was angled toward him, or leaning in his direction, or reflecting his energy back at him. They stood apart, quiet, looking at the floor or the walls or the middle distance anywhere that was not directly at the man beside them. Marcus turned to Coach Davis. "I'll need the main office," he said. 20 minutes. Davis nodded immediately. "Of course." He turned toward the gym floor. His voice when he addressed the room was steady and practiced. "Everyone take a water break. Floor is closed for 20 minutes. Fighters began moving, quietly, quickly, without the usual noise and friction of a training session interrupted. They moved the way people move when they understand that the situation in the room is above their level, and the correct response is to become small and cooperative and invisible. Water bottles were retrieved. Towels were collected. The gym emptied toward the edges in a slow, orderly drift. Trent did not move. Marcus turned back to him. "The sponsorship revocation will be formally filed today," he said. He reached into the lower section of the clipboard and produced a single sheet of heavy cardstock. It was the sponsorship agreement, printed, signed by 3 parties, and stamped with the committee seal in the upper right corner. He held it up between 2 fingers. He looked at it for one moment, then looked at Trent. "You were given access to this facility, this program, and this opportunity because someone believed your physical ability outweighed your character deficits." He set the agreement flat against the clipboard. They were wrong. He took the sheet in both hands. He tore it in half, clean, precise, and complete. One firm motion straight down the center, the heavy cardstock splitting with a sharp, hard crack that echoed briefly off the cinder block walls before the silence absorbed it. He set both halves on top of the cart side by side, edges aligned. Trent stared at them. "Effective immediately," Marcus continued. "You are formally designated as mentally and professionally unfit to represent the national program in any capacity, competitive or developmental. That designation will be filed with the National Registry and shared with all affiliated federations and sponsorship bodies. It is not a suspension. It is not a probationary status." He looked at Trent with the same flat, even expression he had worn all morning, the same expression he had worn when the mop water soaked into his boots, when the notebook was torn, when the punch missed his temple by the width of a heartbeat. It is permanent. Trent's mouth opened. No sound emerged. He closed it again. "You have 30 minutes to remove your personal equipment from the facility," Marcus said. "Coach Davis will provide a bag." Davis was already moving. He returned from the supply closet with a plain black trash bag, the ordinary kind, thin and slightly crinkled, the kind used for gym waste and discarded tape and the general mundane refuse of a working training facility. He held it out toward Trent without comment. His face was professional and entirely neutral. Trent looked at the bag. He looked at his custom gloves, $400 of pristine monogrammed leather sitting on the bench beside the speed bag station. He looked at the gym around him, the brushed steel railing, the platinum tier floor, the glass-walled office, the facility he had moved through for months, as though it had been built specifically to contain his talent and reflect his future back at him in flattering light. He took the bag. He crossed to the bench. He picked up the gloves. He put them in the bag. The same gym fighters who had laughed at the bucket, who had watched the notebook torn in half, who had stood at the railing in complicit silence, while a man was humiliated on his knees, stood now along the walls and watched Trent Sterling pack his things into a trash bag in absolute unbroken silence. Nobody laughed. Nobody spoke. Nobody looked away. It took him 11 minutes. It felt longer. He walked to the exit without looking back. The door opened. The door closed. The sound it made was ordinary. A plain mechanical click, the same sound any door makes when a person leaves a room. Nothing dramatic, nothing final sounding. But it was final. Marcus stood in the center of the gym floor for a moment. He looked at the torn halves of the $2 million contract sitting on top of the card edges, aligned neat and still. He looked at the ring on his right hand. He looked at the gold clipboard under his arm. He looked at the 20 fighters standing along the walls, quiet and attentive and recalibrated, understanding something now about what the sport was and who it belonged to and what it cost to be trusted with it that they had not understood this morning. Then he reached down and picked up the mop. He handed the gold clipboard to Coach Davis without looking at him. He wrapped both hands around the wooden handle fingers, settling into position with the same measured, deliberate tension they had held all morning. He turned back to the wet floor. He began to move the mop in slow, even strokes across the mat, working the dirty water toward the drain in the patient, unhurried way of a man with a job to finish. Marcus handed the torn pieces of the $2 million contract to Trent, turned around, and picked up his mop. That breathtaking, icy shock of watching an arrogant bully lose his entire career without a single punch being thrown is a feeling you cannot fake. If you were in Marcus's shoes holding that Olympic clipboard, would you have given that kid one more chance in the ring or banned him for life immediately? Tell me your verdict down below. Stick around for part 2 to see what happens to the gym owner.